picture this, right? You're sitting on your couch. It's a Thursday, specifically June 25, 2026, and you're watching the World Cup.
Oh, yeah, the perfect summer afternoon.
Exactly. So the United States is taking the pitch against their next opponent.
Right.
And the graphics, they flash across the bottom of the screen.
Right.
You see the flag, you know the team. But, if you're used to the traditional English spelling, you probably did a massive double take right there.
I mean, I know I would.
Right. Because right there on the screen, the country wasn't spelled Turkey. It was spelled Turkye, Turkey.
Yeah, it's one of those subtle moments that just momentarily breaks your brain's autopilot.
Completely.
You recognize the letters, but the arrangement, the inclusion of the Lao over the U, it instantly signals that something fundamental in the geopolitical landscape has shifted right under your nose.
Wait, so it wasn't just a typo by the broadcast team?
No, definitely not a typo.
See, it's like logging into a website you use every single day and realizing the entire branding and logo have completely shifted overnight.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
You know you're in the right place, but you're just wondering, what on earth did I miss?
Right.
Well, that is exactly what we are unpacking in this deep dive.
I'm really looking forward to this one.
Me too. So our mission today is to figure out the actual mechanics of how this name change happened, the layered geopolitical messaging driving it, and perhaps most importantly, we are finally going to get the definitive answer to the ultimate historical trivia question.
Oh, the chicken and the egg situation.
Exactly. But in this case, which actually came first, the country or the Thanksgiving bird?
It is a phenomenal topic because, on the surface, updating a spelling feels like a minor administrative tweak.
Just a little spell check update, right?
Right, but as we'll see, this isn't just about updating a graphic for a soccer broadcast. This is a massive story of global branding, centuries of layered history, the chaotic evolution of language, and really how a modern nation asserts its identity on the world stage.
Let's start with the actual mechanics of this, because I am just fascinated by the logistics.
They're pretty wild.
I mean, you don't just send out a mass email to the planet and say, hey, please update your spell check, How does a country legally execute a global name change? What triggered that spelling on a global broadcast?
So it is a massive, highly bureaucratic undertaking. A nation can't just flip a switch. It requires a lot of formal diplomatic maneuvering.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and the major turning point occurred back in 2022.
Okay.
The nation's leadership actually submitted a formal letter to the United Nations Secretary General, officially requesting that Turkey replace Turkey in all international forums.
And does the UN get to just vote on that, or?
Well, under international protocol, the UN simply accepted the request. It recognizes the right of a sovereign nation to determine its own name.
Wow. But the UN placard is just the tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, think about all the global systems that rely on country names.
Precisely. It's huge. Once the UN adopts it, the bureaucratic dominoes basically start to fall.
Right.
It triggers updates across global databases, international aviation codes, shipping manifests, foreign diplomatic registries, you name it.
That sounds exhausting.
Oh, it is. By 2023, the U.S. State Department had formally adopted the new spelling for their official communications, followed by other international bodies. It's an administrative overhaul on just a massive scale.
But I've noticed a funny little quirk in how it's actually rolling out, because even with the official adoption, these organizations didn't exactly just rip the Band-Aid off overnight.
No, they didn't, and for a good reason. You can't simply erase centuries of linguistic habit.
Fair point.
If you look at the websites for both the UN and the U.S. State Department today, they actually list the nation as Turkey, followed immediately by Turkey in parentheses.
Oh, really? So they are essentially building like a linguistic bridge for the public.
Exactly. In linguistics, the traditional English spelling Turkey is what we call an exonym.
An exonym.
Yeah. An exonym is simply the name that foreigners or outsiders use for a place, which, often differs from what the locals call it.
Oh, like how English speakers say Germany instead of Deutschland.
Spot on. So the parenthetical formatting bridges the gap between the historical exonym that the global public already knows and the official endonym, the internal name that the government has requested.
That makes a lot of sense. Which brings us to the motive, really. Why go through all this bureaucratic hassle?
That's the big question.
Right. According to the Turkish state broadcaster TRT and think tank leaders like Sinan Ulgan, he's the chairman of İDEM, the literal surface-level reasons for this change were remarkably practical.
Yeah, they were surprisingly blunt about it.
They really were. They essentially pointed directly at North American holiday traditions and said, we need to distance ourselves from the Poultry Association.
The Thanksgiving Bird Association was explicitly cited, yes.
That's just wild to me.
I know, but in 2022, TRT literally told the BBC that a primary aim was to sever the linguistic tie to the bird.
Wow.
And Olgun echoed this in a 2026 interview, pointing out that, frankly, sharing a name with a bird is not ideal for national prestige.
Definitely not.
But they also pointed to a much more damaging linguistic hurdle, which is the English dictionary.
Okay, this part blew my mind when I was reading through the source material.
It's pretty striking.
The state network actually cited the Cambridge English Dictionary as a primary grievance. If you look up the word turkey with a lowercase t, the dictionary officially defines it as, and I'm quoting here, something that fails badly, or a stupid or silly person.
Yeah, it's pretty harsh. And when you view this from the perspective of a nation projecting power, influence, and dignity on the global stage, sharing your exact English name with a colloquialism for a catastrophic failure is geopolitically unacceptable.
Oh, absolutely.
Because English operates as the primary lingua franca of global business and diplomacy. Having your nation's name tethered to a punchline in that language actively undermines your soft power.
Think about this through the lens of a massive corporate rebrand, right?
Yeah.
Imagine a prestigious Fortune 500 company looking to expand its global footprint, only to realize that their legacy name happens to translate to massive failure in the world's primary language of business.
That would be a PR nightmare.
Total nightmare. Or imagine they share an acronym with a terrible disease, or they're battling a horrendous string of Yelp reviews tied to their old branding. That company would hire an army of consultants, spend millions of dollars, and legally change their name to escape that baggage and reset their search engine optimization. This whole thing feels like the geopolitical equivalent of a corporate rebranding campaign.
You know, that corporate analogy is actually the exact framework the nation's leadership used.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Former Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu explicitly told the press that the formal name change would increase our country's brand value.
Wow, brand value.
Exactly. That is direct marketing and public relations terminology applied to the identity of a nation-state.
But let's look beneath the surface here. Because a dictionary definition and a bird are like convenient, tangible reasons. But in geopolitics, a massive rebrand is never just about escaping a bad joke.
No, there's always a deeper layer.
So what is the deeper narrative strategy driving this?
To understand the deeper motive, we really have to look at the domestic political origin. The push for the global adoption of Turkey comes directly from President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his Justice and Development Party, which is commonly known as the AKP.
Okay, so this is coming from the very top.
Right. President Erdogan stated in 2022 that Turkey is the bought representation and expression of the Turkish people's culture, civilization, and values.
Okay, so this is way less about avoiding the bird and much more about establishing the word Turkey as a vessel for an entire civilization's identity.
Exactly. It's about narrative control. There's this researcher, Dazuz Düzgün, who studies political toponymy.
Toponymy?
Yeah, the analysis of how and why places are named.
Ah, got it.
He analyzed this shift extensively, and he pointed out that one of the central narratives the AKP government has built over its tenure is the emergence of a new Turkey.
A new Turkey.
Right.
Which inherently implies they're actively distancing themselves from an old one, right?
Precisely.
So what exactly does the old version represent in this political framework?
Well, in this specific political narrative, the old Turkey is often associated with a nation that was highly Western-leaning, one that, defined itself relative to European approval and perhaps lacked a distinctly independent, culturally assertive voice on the world stage.
So the new Turkey narrative is designed to project the exact opposite of that.
Yes. It projects an image of a nation that is confident, stable, powerful, and highly visible on its own terms.
That makes a lot of sense.
Düzgün notes that the nation has been deliberately looking to differentiate itself from Westernization. Taking control of their name internationally is a deeply symbolic piece of a much broader claim to agency.
Right.
It's a declaration that essentially says, we define ourselves. We will no longer passively accept the exonyms that Western Europe assigned to us centuries ago.
That is a potent message for national pride. But let's be real for a second. Does changing the spelling of your name on a UN placard or a World Cup broadcast actually succeed in shifting how a person in London or New York or Tokyo views the country?
Yeah.
Or is this massive bureaucratic exercise, essentially political theater meant for the voters back home.
That is the central debate among political strategists observing this rebrand.
I saw it.
The reality is that the reaction within the country has been decidedly mixed, and it's crucial we view this impartially as a matter of political strategy.
Sure.
On one side of the aisle, supporters view the name change exactly as the government intended. It is a proud, long overdue reclamation of national identity and a definitive boost to global prestige.
And on the other side, if you are a citizen living through the current climate, how might you view it?
Well, on the other side, there are citizens and political analysts who view the entire renaming campaign through a highly skeptical lens. They suggest it functions as a strategic distraction.
A distraction from what?
Think about it. Changing a nation's name on the global stage generates massive headlines. It stirs up nationalistic pride and entirely dominates the domestic news cycle.
It's all anyone talks about.
Exactly. So critics argue that this intentionally diverts public attention away from far more pressing domestic issues, specifically periods of severe economic volatility, inflation, and complex internal political challenges that the government is facing.
Wow. So depending on who you ask, it's either a masterclass in restoring cultural agency on the global stage, or it's a very loud fireworks display designed to make you look up at the sky so you don't notice the cracks in the pavement.
Precisely. And as observers, we aren't validating either specific viewpoint.
Right, we're just looking at the strategies.
Exactly. Because as anyone who studies political science understands, a national rebranding effort of this magnitude is rarely executed for a single reason. It operates simultaneously on the international stage as a statement of sovereign agency and on the domestic stage as a highly effective political tool.
Okay, here is the historical irony that I found absolutely fascinating in the source material.
Oh, yeah.
The government is pushing this as the foundational identity of the new Turkey. But this new brand isn't actually new at all. It's the original name.
That's the great paradox at the center of this story. What is being framed internationally as a new identity is, internally, a century old in its modern political usage.
A whole century.
Yeah. The country has officially been using Turkey within its own borders on all of its own legal documents since the modern republic was established following the fall of the Ottoman Empire in 1923.
So while English speakers have been walking around saying Turkey for the last 100 years, the citizens inside the country have been writing Turkey the entire time.
Yes. Now, it's worth noting that even within the country, some locals do still use the English exonym Turkey when they are speaking or writing in English, simply because linguistic momentum is incredibly difficult to break.
Oh, sure. Old habits die hard.
Exactly. But the roots of the name go back much, much further than the founding of the Republic in 1923. The prefix Turk is ancient.
How far back does that prefix actually go?
Long before adopting the modern Republican name, this region was the heartland of the Ottoman Empire, which was a massive, sweeping global power that lasted from 1299 all the way to 1923.
That is a massive run.
It really is. And that empire was frequently referred to by outsiders as the Turkish Empire. The word Turk itself is a direct reference to the ancestral tribes who originally inhabited that geographic area. Historically, those tribes were known as the Turk, or the Turu.
So the root of the official name is quite literally tethered to the ancestral DNA and the ancient tribes of the region.
Yep.
But if the native word is Turk or Turkey, how on earth did the English language twist that into Turkey?
It was essentially a linguistic game of telephone played by medieval English speakers over several centuries.
I love linguistic games of telephone.
Right. During medieval times, English speakers interacted with merchants from the region, heard the localized names, and adapted the moniker into Turkey, spelled Turkeye.
Okay, with an E on the end.
Yeah. And over time, as languages naturally do, the pronunciation and spelling smoothed out. English speakers dropped that final E, and it eventually calcified into just Turkey.
Think about how we process geographic rebrands today, right? It's like when the city of Bombay officially reclaimed the historical name Mumbai in the 1990s.
That's a great example.
Or when Ceylon reverted to Sri Lanka. The English-speaking world gets so comfortable using an outdated, localized translation, which is, let's face it, often a relic of colonialism or medieval trade, that when the nation finally asks the world to use their actual historical name, it feels foreign to the outsiders.
That analogy perfectly captures the friction of this transition. The English-speaking world normalized its own medieval adaptation to such a degree that the authentic endonym is now perceived as a disruption.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
And this brings us perfectly to the riddle we promised at the top of the deep dive.
Yes, the bird.
We have medieval English speakers making up localized names, dropping letters, and smoothing out vowels to describe the Ottoman region. But if Turkey was just a geographic shorthand for the empire, how did a North American bird get tangled up in this linguistic web?
It is arguably one of the most brilliant and chaotic misunderstandings in the history of the English language.
I can't wait.
And to answer your riddle definitively, the country absolutely came first.
The country came first.
Yes. The region and its ancestral people vastly predate the bird's English name. In fact, the country inadvertently shaped the name of the creature that millions of North Americans feast on every year.
Let's break down exactly how this happened, because the history provided by Merriam-Webster is incredibly revealing. This entire mix-up starts in the 16th century, right?
Correct. During the 16th century, Spanish merchants and explorers were navigating the Americas, and they encountered a large, unfamiliar native North American bird. When the Spanish eventually brought this strange new bird back across the Atlantic and introduced it to European markets, the English had to figure out what to call it.
Wait, hold on. If the Spanish brought it back from the Americas, shouldn't it have been given a Spanish name, or at least a derivative of an indigenous American name?
Yeah.
Where do the Ottomans fit into this?
This is where the geopolitics of 16th century trade come into play.
Okay.
Remember, during this era, the Ottoman Empire was at the absolute height of its global power. They controlled the Eastern Mediterranean and massive, vital trade routes.
Right, they were a superpower.
Exactly. They were essentially the unavoidable conduit for any exotic goods entering Europe from the East. Because the Ottomans dominated trade, English speakers developed a very specific and very lazy linguistic habit.
What was the habit?
They started slapping the qualifier Turkish onto almost any exotic, high-value good that arrived in their markets, regardless of where the item actually originated.
Are you serious?
Yep.
If it was new, foreign, and interesting, the English assumed it came through Ottoman merchants, so they just called it Turkish.
Wow. We do this exact same thing today with modern proprietary eponyms.
We do.
Think about it. If you see someone blow their nose, you probably call the facial tissue a Kleenex, even if it's a generic store brand.
Oh, that's true.
Right? Or you might call an inline skate a rollerblade, or call any fancy, fast imported sports car a Porsche. 16th century English speakers essentially treated the word Turkish as the blanket brand name for cool, exotic stuff I've never seen before.
That is the exact psychological mechanism at play. Turkish was a shorthand for exotic quality, so when this strange, fascinating bird from the Americas arrived in England via Spanish merchants, the English applied their usual logic.
Oh, no.
Yeah. They looked at this bizarre animal and dubbed it a turkey cock.
A turkey cock.
Yeah. And because colloquial English naturally trends toward efficiency, people got lazy with the syllables, and the name was eventually shortened to just turkey. That is astonishing. They looked at a bird from North America, imported by the Spanish, and confidently declared, "Ah, yes, a Turkish bird."
It's absurd.
Completely. And now, hundreds of years later, a modern sovereign republic has to petition the United Nations and overhaul global shipping codes just to escape the shadow of that exact 16th century misunderstanding.
It perfectly illustrates how chaotic and accidental the evolution of language can be.
Yeah.
The identity of a global superpower gets attached to a bird entirely by mistake.
Unbelievable.
And centuries later, that historical mistake negatively impacts the brand value, the search engine optimization, and the geopolitical messaging of a modern nation state.
It really is a wild looping journey.
It really is.
So to recap how we got here.
Yeah.
You're sitting on your couch watching a World Cup graphic in 2026. And that single spelling changed the addition of an umlaut and a few rearranged letters takes us down a massive rabbit hole.
A very deep rabbit hole.
We've navigated modern UN bureaucracy, ISO codes, and State Department transitional websites. We've examined the Cambridge Dictionary's rather insulting definitions and how they impact soft power.
Right.
We've unpacked the political branding of the new Turkey, balancing the projection of international agency against the realities of domestic economic distractions. We've traced the fall of the Ottoman Empire back to the ancient tribes of 1299, and we ended up in the 16th century realizing that English merchants were just too lazy to map out where a bird actually came from.
It serves as a brilliant reminder that the words we use on a daily basis, especially the names we assign to nations and cultures, are rarely neutral.
Never.
They're heavily weighted with centuries of historical baggage, the rise and fall of trade routes, modern political maneuvering, and sometimes just plain linguistic misunderstandings.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on, something that builds on everything we've explored today.
Okay, let's hear it.
I want you to go find a world map. Really look at the names printed across the continents. And I want you to wonder how many other countries on that map are currently known globally by names that were assigned to them by medieval merchants,
That's a good question.
or by colonial powers, or by ancient linguistic misunderstandings. How many nations are currently bearing an exonym that is completely different from the name their own people use every single day?
I mean, if the diplomatic transition of Turkey successfully reclaims their national brand and reshapes their global identity, it sets a powerful precedent for every other nation on that map.
Exactly. Who might be next to reclaim their name and their narrative? It really changes how you look at that World Cup broadcast.
It really does.
The next time a graphic flashes across your screen and you find yourself doing a double take at a spelling, you don't immediately recognize, well, it's not just a typo. You might be watching a nation writing a 500-year-old wrong.